So there's something that in Leviticus 19 it says, "Give no regard to mediums or familiar spirits. Do not seek after them to be defiled by them." So there is something that in doing those things, God is telling us, hey, don't go to mediums because it will do something to you. It will be bad for you. In other words, I see God as basically giving us a protective barrier from the general demonic world in which we can erode to a degree. And I think that's one place where he's telling us, hey, look, I didn't say this stuff arbitrarily. I said not to do it because it will harm you. And most of the sins, if we are take an honest look at them, are things that will ultimately kill, steal, and destroy us. And God says not to do them because, it's going to harm us. So anyway, so that's, we can go into occult practices. But the other one we mentioned a little bit is drugs. Now, all throughout history, shamans have been taking specific drugs which immediately take them into the spirit world. The shaman in the old times was a guy that's what he did. He spoke to spirits to find out, which leaves to mix with this, or all the for making elixirs or whatever for health and stuff like that. And other things. He when to plant the crops or different kinds of things like that. That was the shaman's job, to take the drugs, to enter the spirit world to a place where he can talk to this entity and then bring back the information. And we've kind of, in the drug culture with the ayahuasca and DMT and these things nowadays, we've just so put these guys on a pedestal, the shamans of old, but they really weren't on a pedestal back then. There was a reason why there was only one dude in the tribe that did it, and that is because it wasn't a good thing. That guy wasn't having a good life. And it's clear that, even in modern spiritism, they'll tell you, like in the spiritualist churches and stuff, you keep doing this, you're going to get attacked. The more that you do this, you're going to start to feel the effects of it. That's just sort of standard doctrine in the spiritualist churches that contact spirits with regularity. But yeah, so drugs. And today, if you read your average, let's take something like David Icke, who went to Peru and took ayahuasca or DMT. I can't remember. I think it was ayahuasca. And he immediately goes into this place where he has like this 3-hour-long conversation with this being that he just loves because it's so funny and it's so smart and it tells us all this interesting stuff and whatnot. And it's the kind of thing I was telling you before about these things are brilliant. If you ever get into that situation where you're like having a conversation about them with them, and they're trying to give you some kind of information. We see this a lot with alien abduction stories, because in that scenario, I consider it a very severe form of sleep paralysis. They're almost identical, except they are all kind of focused on the deception aspect of it, where they're trying to get the person usually to go and spread this doctrine that's almost always anti-Jesus in some way or another. But in any case, so those kind of drugs are obvious. The Bible, of course, translates the word sorcery, or the word sorcery is the Greek word pharmakia, and which is, of course, where we get the word pharmacy from. So the Bible understands that the taking of drugs is basically sorcery. Now, of course, not all drugs are. I did, with a website called sleepsurvey.org, we did, I think, probably the largest survey ever done on sleep paralysis, and we asked a lot of questions about drugs, which drugs people took, and got information about their severity of their sleep paralysis and things like that. And we found pretty close to what, for example, as I mentioned, there have been studies about things like anxiolytic drugs and serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Those are already known to cause sleep paralysis, but of course the heavier stuff like crystal meth particularly, and ayahuasca, DMT, and some hallucinogens, but not all, are opening doors.
Okay, now that's interesting. I have not heard crystal meth listed with those drugs before as being one that would open doorways.
Well, that's just really from personal kind of experience. No, I'm not that I took meth, but I've talked to a lot of people that had really severe attacks, and meth was obviously the problem there due to their own testimony. Meth actually is one of these things that I would put right on the top of the list of all this stuff, because the people that are experiencing demonic attacks that have been into meth severely, it's some of the worst stuff you could imagine.
Oh yeah.
So whatever meth is doing, and of course I don't really know the physicality of what the difference of the drug chemistry is and all that stuff, but meth is definitely one of them.
Yeah.
Are they being attacked when they're on meth, or just because they've done it in the past?
Both. One time, sometimes it gets so severe when it kind of crosses this line with they're getting it, asleep or whatever. There's a line where it starts to happen when they're awake too, where they'll be fully awake, they can move and everything, but there is, they're being attacked and all the rest of it. So when it can be both for those people. And one Satanist lady, who, by the way, right now is one of the most beautifully saved people in the world. She's just on fire for the Lord or whatever, and just a great lady. But when I first was in contact with her, she was a satanic witch, and she was experiencing, what will kind of pass that level, where it's now happening in her waking state, and they were attacking her, sleep or not. So it can be both.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Never mind.
So yeah, that drugs is that. I guess we can kind of move on from drugs. The other issue is generational. This is one which basically there was a lot of cases where somebody was experiencing really severe sleep paralysis with great regularity, and in our experience there was always some cause, in cases where it's very sporadic, as I mentioned, almost everybody is going to have 1, 2, whatever experiences, and it can be we'll get into some of the other benign reasons here in a minute, but when somebody's experiencing it severely and often, there's always some reason, and we got these cases where none of the obvious reasons were there, and we began to ask this particular question: has your parents or grandparents ever been extremely involved in the occult, or high up in a fraternal order like the Freemasons? And the percentage of people that answered yes to that question, or I don't know, perhaps they were adopted or whatever, that was something we eventually had to include in that, which is kind of ambiguous, but the people that answered yes to that question, my parents were really involved in the occult, or my parents were, or grandparent was like a really high-level Freemason, that almost always was answered yes by those people who we couldn't find any other reason why it was happening so severely. Why it happens is, I think, because when a person is extremely into the occult, let's say your mother or father is extremely into the occult, there is, if they're that into the occult, oftentimes they are doing something to essentially give away the authority that they have over the child. The parents, before a certain age, and this is also true if we found out somebody was saying, oh, I've experienced this since I was, before I can remember, or it started when I was 3 or 4 years old. Before a person can actually do any kind of sin or whatever in order to cause it themselves, we also asked those people this question about their parents or grandparents, and a significant high number of those people were answering yes to this question, which is a pretty rare thing for your parents or grandparents to be. And it's not limited to, did your mom, go to a psychic once? We're asking a question, were they really involved in the occult? And so the answer is yes to that. So I think that what's happening is, in the Satanist world, they do actually sort of give their children over to Satan in a ritual and things like that. And I think probably in the lesser degrees of occultism, where the person doesn't think that they're actually, talking with demons and Satan. They think it's, whatever it is, fairies or whatever it is, spirit guides that they think that they're dealing with. They're still, if they're in contact with the being is sort of encouraging some kind of giving that thing away. And it doesn't have to be an elaborate ritual like in Satanism. As I mentioned with the Ouija board, it's a matter of the same way that you give your authority away in the Ouija board just by essentially giving permission. I think that there is something going on with that too. They're kind of giving the parental authority of their child before that child has its own sort of authority away to the demon. And I think that's also what's happening with the Freemasons. And this is particularly something that happens in high levels. It's not something we see if the person was just, first degree Blue Lodge or whatever, but something is happening at the higher levels which seems to be doing something similar. They're asking them to give away the authority of their child. And of course I can't say that for sure because the rituals are, for the most part, secret. There's some stuff out there, but anyway, the bottom line with the generational issue is that I can't explain exactly why it's happening. I got some guesses, but I don't know. But that it is happening, that it is a cause for sleep paralysis is there. And when generational sleep paralysis is happening, it can be pretty darn severe. It's almost as if it can be as severe as if that person was really into the occult or had taken a lot of those particular drugs or whatever, even though they hadn't done those other things. So it's one of those that I'd put pretty high up there in terms of causes, though that person in that case isn't necessarily at fault. But what usually happens with a generational case is that they essentially start adding to it with their own sin as they grow older. So for what the general scenario is that the person, because they're having what they believe to be supernatural experiences, a lot of times, in most cases, they start to interpret that as them being really psychic or really special in some way. They have some connection with the spirit world that other people don't have, blah, blah, blah. And of course, there's a tendency to this probably because their parents or whatever did kind of lean that direction themselves. So, some of those ideas carried over in terms of just, teaching and stuff like that. But whatever the case, the person seems to embrace that kind of lifestyle as they get older too. And so it kind of adds to the problem when they're adding their own stuff on top of the generational stuff. But that's that. So a few other things. Miscellaneous obsessions or sin. There are certain sins that do seem to cause sleep paralysis, but they tend to be really on the obsessive side. This is not typically... Now, I'll say this. Most people, when, what other kind of sin it is, whether it's sexual sin or, obsessive, stuff or bitterness or blasphemy against God, there's some people that can do those kinds of things and not get sleep paralysis. So it's kind of wishy-washy in that regard. But there are certain people that do. One of the other guys in the UK that does sleep paralysis, his testimony is all about sexual sin and sort of obsessing about pornography, and that was in his case pretty clearly the cause of sleep paralysis. Though I would say that's not usually the case. I think people have different thresholds for that. I'm not sure what's going on, but we can just say sin in general can be the cause. But generally speaking, if somebody's having severe sleep paralysis, regularly, there's usually something else besides just some general sin. And then finally, I have on here plain unlucky, which is, well, there's got a few more here, but plain unlucky basically means that you can be in a place that has had something happen in it before, like certain ritual sites or places where they did a lot of seances in some room or some hotel room. When we were in the band, I remember I look back on it now and know what was happening. There was a coven of witches in the room next to us, and they were there doing... we had some interaction with them, and it was really weird. But looking back and understanding what was happening, it's as clear as day that's what was going on. But the weirdest thing happened that night. Two guys in the band, we had two different hotel rooms. At the same time in the middle of the night, well, we assume it's the same time, we don't really know. In different hotel rooms, one guy from each room got up sleepwalking, something they didn't normally do, and left the hotel room. And one guy kept walking until the morning. We found him on the side of the street walking and had to wake him up. The other guy eventually made it back into the other hotel room that with the door open that he didn't start in, and went to bed in one of those things. Anyway, that's sort of an odd story.
Wow.
But the point is that I got a better one actually about hotel rooms. When my wife and I were on our honeymoon, we took a cruise, and in our cabin, I don't know what was going on or what had happened in that room before or whatever, but I woke up. Well, no, I was dreaming, and I knew the dream was not a normal dream. There was evil overtones. There was just something very tangible about it, something I knew